Cheers and welcome to Irondale Brewing. Today we're going to talk about another Brewzilla brew day. This was brew day number 2 that didn't go well. And we'll see I have some footage. It got a little bit weird at the end because as technical difficulties mounted, I just stopped recording. But we'll kind of see what led up to the failure. And I will probably do a voiceover one segment in particular to keep it PG-13. But basically, what happened on my second Brewzilla brew day is I was brewing a black IPA, and I'll talk about or Cascadian Dark Ale, as I like to call them. And I'll talk about the recipe here in a second. But the Brewzilla started throwing an error that you'll see in the footage that was vessel has boiled dry. And, of course, it had 8+ gallons of wort in it when it started throwing that error. So still don't know exactly what happened. The best guess from the hive mind of the Brewtubers online brewing club was that the Brewzilla has a thermal cutoff switch in it, and it's about yay big, $4 part. I bought an extra one to have on hand for the next time this happens, hopefully, which will be never. But basically, that keeps the heating elements from getting so hot that they destroy themselves. Which, if you don't have any liquid in there, the thing would just overheat basically, and so. That was probably malfunctioning. Dan from the Brewtubers Club kind of diagnosed and thought that was the problem. So I will say a huge shout out to everybody on Brewtubers. Like while I was brewing, I got on the Discord and I said, hey, like what does this error mean? And lots of suggestions and about what to try. I tried resetting the unit, tried, everything. And it just couldn't recover. Basically, the mash seemed to go okay. When I started the boil, it started throwing that error, and then it would never get up to a boil because it would get out up to about 180 degrees or so. It would throw that error, it'd sit for a few minutes, and then it'd try again, and it just was never going to get up to a full boil. And I was going to give up. I was going to throw the wort out. But German Dave, again from Brewtubers, adamantly said, put the wort in a bucket and then get it in a different kettle. And unfortunately, at that point, I didn't have a 10-gallon kettle. That was what I would need to do the whole batch. But I took his advice, and I appreciate it because we're going to get to try the beer at the end here, and salvaged what I could. It turned out to be roughly 4 gallons or so that I could fit in my 5.5-gallon kettle without having it be too much for the boil. And, salvage something. You'll see in the footage, it's, pretty sad looking fermenter when we got the fermentation going, but it was something. And then I didn't waste the entire time. That was the most abused wort I think I have ever done because I ended up transferring it into a bucket and back into the Brewzilla probably 4 times while I tried diagnosing some stuff. And so we'll see. I have not tried this beer. This is fully new to me. So we'll try it here in a second. I do know it's carved up as I think enough after it's been in the kegerator for a while here. But the recipe, let's talk about that. So this was a recipe I found on the American Homebrewers Association. It was a silver medal winning recipe at National Homebrew Competition, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I tweaked it a little bit, so I'm not hopefully do anything wrong here sharing this recipe. But basically, it's 81% 2-row, 4% roughly caramel 80, 4% Munich 2, 4% Carapils, and then a little bit less. I'll put the actual percentages up there, but 3.7% chocolate malt and 3.7% midnight wheat. And what I did for this one, and this was based on the recipe, and kind of I've seen people do this, use this technique, is I steeped the dark grains in the fridge overnight. So I milled them up and then steeped them just in cold water in the fridge overnight. And then last 10 minutes of the boil, poured the liquid from those, not the grains, but just the liquid into the boil. And supposedly that'll smooth things out because you're not boiling those dark grains, which is kind of the way you don't want a Cascadian Dark Ale to be super roasty like a stout or anything like that, but you do want the color for sure. And you want some level of roastiness, and there's a little bit of, play in the amount or allowance in the range of the roastiness in the style. But this one I wanted it to be nice and smooth. And then for hops, I used 2 ounces of Cascade at 60, 2 ounces of Centennial at 15, 1.75 ounces of Citra at 5, and then I dry hopped with Citra Cryo for 3 days. I think it wound up being a total of 5 with the cold crash in the mix. And let's see, ABV of 7.1. I was going for an OG of 1067, final gravity of 1013, 70 IBUs, and I used Cellar Science Cali. I was going to use BRY 97, but I didn't have any. That was another weird thing. I'm like, how do I not have the yeast I was going to use? Check ahead of time, folks. Now, it didn't quite work out. The numbers were a little bit off. I'm still getting low efficiency on the Brewzilla. I've had some eagle eye folks watching my videos saying, hey, your crush looks like it's not quite right, so I need to double check my mill settings. And this time also I used the brew bag. So I milled what I thought was much finer and used the brew bag in the malt pipe. And still got about 62% efficiency, which is about 1% improvement on my previous one. So clearly I got some work to do in that area. But yeah, let's just stop there for now and get into the brew day footage, which was incredibly frustrating. And then at the end, we'll see how the beer actually came out. This weekend, we're going to be brewing a Cascadian Dark Ale, also known as a black IPA. Brewery's a little bit of a mess, but I decided I'd just start filming. Clean that up later. Grain-wise, what we're doing for this one is 81% two-row. I'm going to be using RAR for this. Hopefully this doesn't make you dizzy doing the lineup of grains here. And then about 4% each of Caramel 80, Munich 2, and Carapils. And then I haven't done this before, but I'm going to be doing about 3.7% each of chocolate malt and midnight wheat. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to get it milled up, and then I'm going to put it in cold water in the refrigerator to steep for about 24 hours or so before the brew day, and then put the steeping liquid from that in the kettle with about 10 minutes left in the boil. And in theory, what that should do is smooth this out a little bit, because what I'm going for in this black IPA is, I guess, just smoothness. I've had a couple that are a little bit too roasty. There's not a lot out there in the world commercially, but I just wanted to try. It seemed like a good opportunity to try this technique to cold steep the grains before throwing them in. People do this with stouts as well. I personally like a little bit of roastiness in the stout, but for this, it seemed like a good opportunity to try that. And then what we'll be using for hops that I didn't dig out is it's going to be, I'll just tell you the IBUs. Total IBU on this batch is going to be about 70. So I'm going with 35 IBUs of Cascade. So 60-minute boil, it's 2.2 ounces. And then at 15, I'm going to do 1.75 ounces for 23 IBU of Centennial. And then at 5 minutes, going to do 11 IBU. So in my case, that's 1.75 ounces of Citra. And then I'm going to dry hop for 3 days with 1.25 ounces of Citra Cryo at 24%. And the reason I'm doing 3 days, there's a lot of debate about, kind of what works best for dry hopping. I don't want to get too intense with the dry hop, and I also don't want to get into I guess the best way I describe it is that kind of almost dusty hop burn you get if you dry hop for too long, and I want to avoid that because I want this to be, it's going to be a pretty big beer. It comes in at almost 7%, I think, 6.8, and 70 IBU. So, but I don't want the hops to just take over. So I'm hoping that the 3 days dry hop in conjunction with a couple of days of cold crash should be enough contact time to get some pretty good dry hopping character from the Citra Cryo. Also using Cryo because what I've found anyways, that's a little bit of a smoother dry hop character as well. So yeah, hopefully that isn't underdoing it, but I definitely didn't want to overdo it. So that's kind of the makeup of this beer. I'm going to get these dark grains milled so I can get them steeping, and more footage to come. And again, pardon my mess. I got stuff laying all over the place. Got a new wrapped temp control. Got the new wrapped pill charging. That's just the case for it. Anyway, lots of changes all at once. So here are the dark grains that I milled pretty fine. I did the smallest setting on my mill, which I think is 0.025 inches. That seemed to be the collective wisdom on cold steeping is that you want it pretty fine. So you can see, that is pretty darn fine. Try to get a close up there. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know. Anyway, small. And then to that, you want to add 2 quarts. I might do a little more than 2 quarts. You want to add about 2 quarts per pound of grains to cold steep. So I've just got that measured out. And I'm using RO water since my tap water is fairly fairly, sorry, it's early Saturday morning, I can't talk, fairly chlorine-y, so we're going to go with RO water for this. I'm just going to pour this right in. You could use a bag. I'm just going to do this, and then when I filter out the liquid, I'm just going to do it through a coffee filter to make sure, because you don't want any of the grains in your wort, obviously, but should spreading this out a little bit more. Yeah. And so I will stir that up to make sure, I won't make you watch that, but I'll stir that up to make sure it gets good good coverage on all the grains, and put the lid on this stock pot and stick it in the fridge overnight. It's about 38. Stuff I was reading said you don't want to go much below 38, which is, that's pretty, excuse me, common refrigerator temperature. But you can just do room temperature. I'm going to do cold because I'm a little bit concerned about just leaving it at room temperature. You are, going to boil it for a few minutes, so probably not a lot of likelihood for, random wild stuff to start growing in there. But fridge will make me feel a little bit better, and it seems to have not much impact on it. There is a whole article from like a 2002, I think it is, issue of the Zymergy magazine from one of the scientists at Brew. I can't remember her name, Marianne something. And they did a whole thing at Brew, and temperature doesn't seem to matter. Some people heat the water up and cool it down. I don't think that matters. So I'm just going with room temperature RO, stick it in the fridge overnight, and then we'll add it to the boil tomorrow on brew day in the last 10 minutes. And there we have the rest of the lovely grains for tomorrow. I'm getting ahead of this. Usually I do, everything all in one shot, but that makes for a very long brew day. So I'm trying to do as much prep work today as I can. And I did mill at 0.025. I think it is 0.025. It's not 0.0025. That'd be too small, I think. But anyway, small setting on my 3-roller mill. And I do have, I don't know, probably in the sequence of things haven't mentioned that I got a Brewzilla 65 liter. Doesn't have the controller on it. But, and I am going to be using a bag. The 0.025 setting would be too small for the malt pipe on the Brewzilla. So I got a brew bag that fits the Brewzilla that I'm going to put inside the malt pipe and hopefully get better efficiency. The first batch I did on this, I got 61% efficiency with a 0.04 mil setting. Not terrible. Obviously, new system, I'm going to have to dial in, see what works for my setup, etc. But I figured, hey, for the second batch, I'll try what I was used to with the brew bag when I was just doing stuff in a brew kettle on an induction cooktop, and see if that works better for efficiency. I'm guesstimating 70% on this batch, but we'll see how that goes. And it's something to try for the process. The other thing I'll mention is that I changed my mind a little bit, and instead of using all raw 2-row, I do have, and I haven't done a video on this either, probably will have by the time this comes out. So local to me is Chimacum Valley Granary. They have started floor malting a variant of Maris Otter that's locally grown here. And they gave us, us being the local brew club, they gave us 12.5 pounds of this stuff. I made an amber with it that only used about 9.5 pounds, and that amber came out just fantastic. I need to do a video on that as well. So anyway, I had a couple of pounds, 3 pounds, something like that left over. So I mixed it in with the raw because I figured that'd be a good way to use that up. The interesting thing about this floor malted stuff is it's a little bit sweeter and has a little bit higher moisture content compared to the raw that I got from More Beer. Worked really well in the amber. I think, that makes up about a quarter of the 2-row in this batch, so it shouldn't have a huge impact, but I just thought it was a nice way to use that up. It's excellent grain, and it worked, like I said, super well in that amber, so I figured I don't want it to go to waste, so I threw it in this batch, and we'll see how that goes. We are kicking off the Cascadian Dark Ale brew day, getting the mash water heated up. I'm going to mash at 151. I set it to 154. I haven't seen a huge temperature drop when I mash in, and I am, probably mentioned this before, using a bag in the malt pipe. This is batch number 2 for me on this 65 liter Brewzilla. The last time, the first batch I did, I got about 61% efficiency. So I milled the grains with a smaller setting on the mill and using the bag, and we'll see if that gets my efficiency up. Plus, I think it'll be a little bit easier to clean, keep more stuff out of the brew, but we'll see. This is all I'm learning as I go, as usual. So we'll see how batch number 2 goes. All right, we are mashed in. I am still figuring out with the Brewzilla how best to film the actual activity, so this will probably just be more of an update with some shots here and there, what's going on. I need to figure out how to get a good angle on my tripod and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, we're mashed in, and temperature, I'm shooting for 151. I am using the PID on the Brewzilla. Last batch, it kept it super steady. I'm hoping using the PID with the settings that I gleaned from various sources that I'll put in the comments. But yeah, got mashed in, got the pump running. One thing I did notice on the first batch is if you have the recirculation arm kind of turned more this way, so it's like a straight shot in, the hose goes all the way down into the grain bed, which you don't necessarily want. So, because then you get channels. So I turned it at an angle and have the hose kind of off to the side, and that seems to keep it, kind of above the grain bed. And the other thing to make sure is if you do have your hose going down in your grain bed, that can be okay, but make sure you do not shut the pump off while it's down in the grain bed, because it'll suck grain back up into your pump. So, and the other thing I have, as you can see over here, is the flexi arm. A lot of people use that for cleaning. Some people use it for mashing. I may try that next time, but I just decided to go with what I was used to, in quotes, for my one batch for this one. But yeah, so far so good. So we're going to mash for an hour at 151, and I'll give you updates in a little bit here. Probably should have mentioned this earlier, but you note the color going through there is not particularly dark. And that, of course, is because I'm cold steeping the dark grains, which is chocolate malt and midnight wheat, to hopefully mellow those out a little bit, so then you don't get the astringency that you can get with some darker grains, which I don't want in this particular thing I'm going for with this black IPA. So what I'm going to do here in a minute is, or when the boil starts, is basically I'm going to strain the dark grain liquid into that with a coffee filter, just to make sure I don't get any grains in there. Probably overkill, but as fine as I ground them, I don't think that strainer would quite do it. So anyway, that's why the color is kind of light at the moment, but it will darken up when we add that those steeping liquids at the last 10 minutes of the boil is my plan. I've never heard of this camera to the side, so I don't know how this is going to work out. But basically, now that the mash is done, with the bag in the malt pipe, I was able to just kind of push the handles to the bag off to the side, pull the malt pipe out with the handle per usual, the Brewzilla malt pipe handle that is, and it's draining while I bring that up to a boil. So that worked well. I have the kettle size bag also, but I do not know how well that would work, because you'd have to have a pulley, and this wasn't horrible. This is, I can't remember how many pounds of grain it was, 15 or so. It's heavy, but it wasn't undoable. More than that, you probably want a pulley. But yeah, if you had a bag that went directly in the kettle and you weren't using the malt pipe, you probably just have to use the pulley. But it seemed to work well, and then it's just draining out through the bottom of the malt pipe, so that worked pretty well. I'm hearing clanking, though. I hope that's just heating up. I'm going to check on that. And it is at this point that the swearing ensued, so I'm doing a voiceover here. At first, I thought maybe it was just a little bit of a glitch that it would work itself out, but that proved not to be the case. So we'll see in future clips, or in the clips that are after this one, that I had to frantically move as much wort as I could to my old setup of my Anvil 5.5-gallon kettle on my induction cooktop and salvage what I could. And the Brewzilla, the other thing I'll mention here is that the Brewzilla, when I tried to clean it later, it wouldn't even get above 80 degrees without with the PBW running through it without that error getting thrown. So clearly something was off with this unit. That happens. I get it. But in the moment, it was pretty frustrating. So we'll see how the rest of or how I finish the brew day out here in a second. Another little tip about my setup here, or not really a tip, but explanation of what I'm doing here. There's that alarm again. It's going to be a long boil. So normally, if you watch some of my older videos, I brewed over here and did smaller batches. And sorry, the lighting's terrible in here with all this stuff going. But of course, the Brewzilla won't fit over there because this is a more traditional kitchen setup with cabinets and blah, blah, blah. So, and that's where the range hood is. Thankfully, I have these windows here, double hung, so I have the top parts open. And what I'm doing is I just took a little fan and I'm just blowing the steam out the window. And that seems to work pretty well. Last time I did a 90-minute boil, just because my volume was a little bit high at the end of 60. And some steam collected kind of up in that corner there. It wasn't too bad. But anyway, this seems to be doing a good job of pushing the steam right out the window, top window there as it starts to rise. So that's my solution for not having a range hood where my Brewzilla is. So this is turning into a really interesting brew day. We're back to Old Faithful here. Brewzilla seemed to be having problems. So thanks to the advice of the Brewtubers online brew club, best brew club ever, basically, since the Brewzilla kept freaking out, they gave me some suggestions. I was about to give up, but German Dave said, well, why don't you just rack the wort off into a clean bucket and then give it another shot. When I took the Brewzilla apart and had it emptied, there's nothing at the bottom. So I don't know why it keeps thinking it's boiling dry, but called an audible here. I don't have, a 10-gallon pot. Maybe it's a good indication you should have one around. So I pulled out my old 5.5-gallon anvil here and saved 4 gallons of the wort, put it in there, and I'm just going to boil for 30 minutes and hope for the best. Hope I get something out of this because it's really frustrating. Another member of the Brewtubers said that maybe the thermal element in the Brewzilla basically needs to be replaced. So luckily it's new enough that I should be okay under warranty, but this brew day is turning into quite the disaster. But hey, here's the black IPA minus the steaming grains, happily boiling on my old induction cooktop. We'll see what I get out of it. It's going to be interesting. This wort has been pretty abused at this point. I mean, it got hot enough that I'm not worried about infection per se, but yeah, quite an adventure here. Forgive the noise and the chaos. The all-important addition of the steaming grains. Oh yeah. Trying to salvage this brew day if at all possible. So if the measure of a successful brew day is getting some beer in a fermenter, I guess I won, but yeah, let's just say not happy with how things went, mad at the Brewzilla. I think I should have just given up. I don't know this is going to come out. I guess salvaging half of it's better than nothing, maybe, but now I have twice as much stuff to clean up. Anyway, I don't want to be a bummer. Hey, I got a tilt in there. That might be, or sorry, not a tilt, but a wrapped pill. Maybe that thing will work, and I can call that a win. But I don't know. I ended up just doing a 30-minute boil and just making stuff up as I went along. And yeah, so here we are with a half-full fermenter of beer that may or may not come out. But hey, what the heck? We'll see what happens. The volume on this batch is pretty sad, but the activity, I like that. Stuff's happening. We'll see how this turns out. All right, so we're back with the Cascadian Dark Ale, Black IPA if you prefer. I did want to read the BJCP. You can look this up, but just for context while you're watching the video so you don't have to go look it up. Basically, a Black IPA is a specialty IPA, style 21B. And the overall impression, a beer with the dryness, hop-forward balance, and flavor characteristics of an American IPA, only darker in color. Obviously, this is not traditional IPA, but without strongly roasted or burnt flavors. The flavor of darker malts is gentle and supportive, not a major flavor component. Drinkability is a key characteristic. So that's why I steeped those dark grains. And with the lower volume, and since I hadn't boiled the dark grains for the last 10 minutes, because for context, the Brewzilla failed, I think I said this before, but before it boiled, so the boil was all done in a different kettle. So I ended up dumping the full amount of the dark grains into the smaller batch, 4 gallons. And it's still not super dark. I mean, I like the color. It almost comes off a little bit, especially in that light, a little bit reddish brown, dark brown, which I kind of like. In the stem of the glass, I don't know how you can see that. You can kind of still see through it just a little bit. So it's not as dark as a stout. Got a nice, pretty fluffy tan head on it that doesn't look bad. I should have done the aroma first. Okay, so, and this is kind of the fun part of black IPAs, is what you're looking at. You might think, porter, brown ale maybe, but on the nose, it's all, of course, Citra hops. Since I dry hopped and used Citra hops in there, and those tend to come out pretty strongly. So it's a little bit of a trick of the eye, but I also like the flavor mix. And I haven't had a sip of this yet, but we'll see what I think. I won't even prejudge. But so color, yeah, it's dark. I mean, I think I was expecting it to actually be a little bit darker. I don't know if I can hold that up like this. Maybe that works better. But I like the color, and it's a nice kind of rich, coppery ruby brown. All right, and I already mentioned the aroma, but it's pretty much all those Citra hops, and which is not unpleasant, but a little bit of a little bit of messing with your brain there versus the versus how it looks. Okay, let's take a taste and see how this came out. First try of this stuff. Yeah, that's it's not bad. I assumed, as abused as the wort was during this process with the failure of Brewzilla, that this was like going to be a dumper. But actually, it's pretty good. I would say it's pretty drinkable, so it fits the drinkability characteristic. For me, compared to some of the other black IPAs that I've had, one of my favorites is Bad Santa. I don't know if you can get that where you are located. Let me make sure I'm saying, I think it's Deschutes, but I want to look that up. But that is one of my favorite. Actually, I love that beer not even just as a holiday beer. It's just one of my favorites, but it only comes out at around the holidays. No, not the movie. Bad Santa beer. Sorry, I should have looked this up ahead of time. It is Pelican. Sorry, Pelican. So I don't know how widely Pelican is distributed. We get it out here in the Pacific Northwest. But if you can get that came out really badly. If you can get your hands on or get a hold of some Bad Santa, it's really good. If you just want to try what I would consider to be a really good black IPA. This one for me, it's very drinkable, and I like Citra hops. I may have said Cascade earlier. I like Citra hops, so it works from that perspective. The roasty character is nice and smooth, and it's just in the background, kind of in the finish. And so I think overall it works pretty well. And I do want to say thanks again, particularly to German Dave. He was the most adamant about, like, don't throw your wort out. Try to save what you can. And I was just about to take a sledgehammer to the Brewzilla and give up. But anyway, I said I would name the beer after German Dave if it came out okay. But he said I don't even like black IPAs, so I guess I won't name it after German Dave. But anyway, thank you for making me say this, because now at least I have a finished beer that gives me something to go on for next time. And that's a big part of homebrewing, right? You do this way, you do things one way one time. And at least for me, I immediately think, if I had to do it again, I'd do something differently. I think for me, much as I love Citra hops, I don't know that I like the prominent Citra in this style of beer. I will have to do more research about what other people do. It sounded good on paper, and it's definitely drinkable, and pretty good. But there's just something about this style that makes me want a more piney hop than the Citra. So probably if I did this again, and now that I've mentioned Bad Santa, I should go look and see what they did, if I can find any information about that. But if I were to do this again, or do a black IPA again, I think I would go with more of a Cascade Centennial prominence instead of the Citra. But all in all, given the horror story that was that brew day, getting a decent beer out of it, the head retention was decent there for a while, but I've been blathering, but nice lacing. For as much as this was abused and it came out this drinkable, I definitely call that a win. So I think I will, it's a nice, a little bit heavier, fall/winter beer. So I think I will enjoy drinking this one. I would do it differently next time, but that tends to always be the case. But yeah, in terms of salvaging something out of the brew day, definitely a win. And I will enjoy drinking what little of this came out of the fermenter and went into the keg. But anyway, that's Brewzilla Brew Day number 2. Huge kudos to More Beer. Again, if I didn't say this already, I think I said it in my last video. That brew day was on a Sunday. I emailed them Sunday after I got done, cleaning up the war room that was the brewery that day, and just explain what happened. And they, no questions asked, immediately shipped me a new Brewzilla. I sent them the old one back, and so that's fantastic customer service. So I really appreciated. I figured I'd have to troubleshoot and go back and forth, which would be fine. I understand that, but they just immediately shipped me a new one. And the new one, I have done one batch on. It worked flawlessly. So we'll hope. I'm going to do another one this coming weekend for Learn to Brew Day. So hopefully that one will go equally well. But that's it for this video. Cheers again. Try yourself a Cascadian Dark Ale or Black IPA if you've never had one. It's an interesting style. Generally speaking, when I talk to other beer, nerds, it tends to be something you love or hate. I tend to like them, especially Bad Santa. If you can find that one in particular, it's excellent. There's another one from Allagash called Haunted House that I see some people refer to as a black IPA. I don't personally think it fits that style, but I have not had one this year, so I need to hunt that down and try it again. But yeah, that might be another one to try, since I saw some people refer to it that way. I don't remember it being particularly hoppy. I remember it being more of just like a really heavy, rich brown ale, but I could be misremembering since I hadn't had one in a year. So that's it for today. I think next video will probably be pumpkin beer tasting. That'll be fun. I have 8 or 10, so I will abuse myself so you don't have to. Another thing, love or hate, is pumpkin beers for sure. But until next time, thank you very much for watching and subscribing and liking and all that good stuff, and cheers.